There are moments in military history when silence breaks in a way that forces analysts to look up from their maps and recalibrate their assumptions. This is one of those moments. After more than a quarter century of deep overhaul, structural delays, funding battles, and repeated skepticism from Western observers, Russia has revived its largest combat ship, a naval platform many in NATO quietly assumed would never return to meaningful service. But now, against a backdrop of shifting global maritime competition, the vessel is back in the water, and the strategic conversation is changing faster than many expected. For years, Western commentary treated the ship less as a future threat and more as a floating symbol of Soviet-era overreach. The narrative was simple and convenient: too old, too damaged, too expensive to restore. But military modernization rarely follows the neat timelines predicted by outside analysts. What matters is not the calendar, it is capability, intent, and timing. And the timing of this revival is what makes planners in Washington and Brussels pay closer attention than they might publicly admit. To understand why this development matters, you have to look beyond the hull itself and into the broader pattern of Russian naval strategy. Moscow has never tried to mirror NATO ship for ship. That was never the plan. Instead, Russian doctrine has traditionally focused on asymmetric leverage, creating enough credible capability in key domains to complicate Western planning and stretch alliance resources across multiple theaters. The return of a massive, modernized combat vessel fits directly into that logic. Technically, the ship that has now been refloated is not simply the same platform that entered Overhaul decades ago. Over the past 26 years, the vessel has undergone phased structural reinforcement, propulsion work, electronic modernization, and survivability improvements. While not every upgrade has been publicly confirmed, and some details remain closely held, available indicators suggest Russia focused on extending operational lifespan while selectively integrating newer combat and sensor technologies. One of the most critical aspects of the refurbishment process involved the hull and power plant systems. Large surface combatants live or die by propulsion reliability, and earlier generations of Russian heavy ships were often criticized for maintenance intensity. The deep overhaul appears to have targeted exactly this vulnerability. Engineers reportedly focused on improving internal systems resilience, damage control automation, and sustained deployment capability, areas that directly affect whether a ship can project presence beyond coastal waters. Equally important is the electronics suite. Modern naval warfare is no longer decided by who has the biggest ship, but by who sees first, tracks first, and integrates fastest. Over the last 2 decades, Russia has invested heavily in radar modernization, electronic warfare packages, and layered air defense integration. Even partial incorporation of these systems into a large surface combatant significantly changes how that vessel functions within a task group. From NATO's perspective, the concern is not that one ship suddenly shifts the global naval balance. That would be an exaggeration. The real issue is cumulative pressure. Every additional credible Russian platform forces planners to allocate surveillance assets, update threat models, and consider new maritime contingencies. Strategy at this level is about friction, and Moscow understands friction very well. There is also a geographic dimension that often gets overlooked in surface-level analysis. Russia's naval posture spans the Arctic, the North Atlantic approaches, the Mediterranean via the Black Sea connection, and increasingly the Indo-Pacific through partnership operations. A revitalized large combat ship gives the Russian Navy greater flexibility in signaling presence across these corridors. Presence in naval strategy is not symbolic. It shapes shipping routes, intelligence coverage, and escalation calculations. Critics in Western defense circles have been quick to argue that long refits often produce ships that are technologically uneven, partially modernized but constrained by legacy architecture. There is some historical basis for that concern. However, Russian modernization programs over the past decade show a consistent pattern. Rather than attempting full Western-style digital overhauls, Russian engineers often prioritize targeted upgrades that deliver the most operational impact for the least structural disruption. It is a pragmatic approach, born partly from budget realities and partly from long institutional experience operating mixed-generation fleets. Another factor quietly shaping this development is the evolving nature of maritime conflict itself. 20 years ago, large surface combatants were increasingly viewed as vulnerable in the face of precision-guided munitions and advanced anti-ship missiles. That threat has not disappeared, but the battlefield has become more layered. Electronic warfare, decoys, long-range air defense, and networked fleet operations have extended survivability for well-supported surface groups. A modernized heavy ship operating within an integrated defensive umbrella is a very different target compared to a standalone Cold War-era vessel. From Moscow's perspective, the messaging value of this revival is almost as important as the hardware. Russia has spent the past several years signaling resilience under pressure, economically, industrially, and militarily. Bringing a massive warship back into service after 26 years reinforces a narrative the Kremlin has consistently pushed, that Russia retains deep industrial endurance even under sustained Western sanctions and technological restrictions. NATO planners, of course, will not publicly characterize this as a major shock. Official statements typically remain measured and cautious, but within defense analysis circles, developments like this trigger quieter reassessments. Naval intelligence doesn't look at a single platform in isolation. It looks at patterns, shipyard activity, fleet composition trends, deployment cycles, and doctrine signals. The reappearance of a long-dormant major combatant feeds directly into that larger analytical picture. There is also the psychological layer of maritime power projection. Large warships carry symbolic weight that smaller platforms do not. When such a vessel enters a region, whether the Arctic approaches, the Mediterranean, or a distant exercise zone, it changes the visual and operational environment. Carrier groups and heavy surface combatants are as much instruments of perception management as they are tools of kinetic warfare. Moscow has historically understood this dual function very clearly. At the same time, it's important to stay grounded in realistic assessment. A single refurbished ship does not erase the broader numerical advantages NATO maintains in blue water naval forces. Western fleets still possess deeper carrier strike capacity, more extensive global basing networks, and larger overall tonnage. But strategic competition is rarely about absolute parity. It's about where pressure points emerge and where unexpected capabilities complicate planning. What makes this particular revival noteworthy is the timing relative to the broader security environment. Maritime tensions in the Arctic are rising. North Atlantic sea lane security has returned to strategic focus. Indo-Pacific naval dynamics are becoming more complex by the year. In that context, any additional large Russian surface asset carries more weight than it would have a decade ago. Another layer worth watching is how Russia chooses to deploy the ship operationally once full readiness is declared. If the vessel remains primarily in training and limited patrol roles, its strategic impact will remain modest. But if Moscow integrates it into high-visibility deployments, joint exercises, or long-range presence missions, the signaling effect could expand significantly. Deployment patterns will tell analysts far more than refurbishment announcements ever could. There is also the industrial lesson behind this story. Completing a 26-year deep refurbishment, despite delays, accidents, funding strain, and sanctions pressure, demonstrates a certain persistence within the Russian naval industrial base. It doesn't mean the system is flawless. It doesn't mean timelines were efficient, but it does show that Russia remains capable of sustaining extremely long-cycle military projects when it considers them strategically important. For NATO, the prudent response is not alarmism, but adaptation. Western naval planners have decades of experience managing evolving Russian maritime capabilities. Surveillance, tracking, and layered deterrence frameworks are already deeply embedded in alliance doctrine. But each additional revived platform adds another variable to an already complex maritime equation. What happens next
will lend less on the ship itself and more on the strategic environment into which it sails. If current great power competition continues to intensify, particularly in northern waters, platforms like this will gain relevance faster than many peacetime analysts expect. Naval history is full of systems that seemed marginal until the geopolitical climate shifted around them. In the end, the return of Russia's largest refurbished combat ship is not about nostalgia for Soviet-era naval ambition. It's about present-day signaling, incremental capability, and long-gain positioning. Moscow is not trying to outbuild NATO ship for ship. It is trying to ensure that in every key theater, the alliance must continue to watch the horizon carefully. And now, after 26 years beneath the surface of doubt and delay, one more very large silhouette has reappeared on that horizon.